Is there one or the other camera that I should look at, or look at you?
You can look into the camera if you like, Barry.
Well, we lived at number 6 Vanderhoof, which has since been demolished and replaced with something more munificent. My family moved to Leaside when I was 4 years old. And I was born in Windsor and lived there for 3 years, and then we were a year in Montreal, and then Dad transferred to Toronto in 1947. We lived on Côte St. Catharines, but apart from that, I don't remember a lot of Montreal. I remember getting sand in my eye in a sandbox one day and having to go to hospital. And I remember sticking my finger in an electrical outlet at the hairdressers. But, 4 years old, I mean, hell, I can hardly remember what happened yesterday, and I'm not going to remember what happened when I was 4. From Vanderhoof Avenue, we could walk over to the present site of Sunnybrook Plaza. It was a swamp then, and we'd take jars and catch tadpoles in the swamp. And that McDonald's that was built at the corner of Bayview and Eglinton was, prior to that, it was an automobile dealership that was sort of on the surface there. But McDonald's wanted to excavate, and they thought they were going to put up that McDonald's for, I don't know, $150,000 or something like that. Well, 3 or 4 years and $450,000 later, the McDonald's finally got built, because I can remember them driving the pile drivers down, and they had to drive those things down until a certain weight from a certain height only displaced the pile a minimal amount, you see. And then they were either at bedrock or they were far enough into that hard pan clay that it would support the structure. And so that McDonald's was a long time getting built, and so in fact was the condo that was put behind Sunnybrook Plaza, that's more recent. But they had water problems there as well. And the hill where the kids sit and watch the football games now was a clay cliff. In fact, I saw one along Burke Brook just the other day that reminded me of that clay cliff in what we now know as Talbot Park. We called it Bell's Hill, but I'm told that Bell's Hill was actually a little further to the east of there. But in any case, our mothers were afraid that we were going to dig into this clay cliff and that the clay would collapse on us and we'd be suffocated. We were always warned about digging into that clay cliff. But of course, it ultimately was bulldozed into a nice sloping hill and sodded and everything for the park. Oh yeah, we tobogganed there as kids. And now and then somebody would get hit. In fact, I was shoveling snow there about 3 years ago, and a kid came down in a toboggan and submarined me right on the stairs at the end of Cameron Crescent. So I gave him a little talking to, but I remember one time we went to the Rosedale Golf Club up at the top of Mount Pleasant, and they had a very large hill there. It's still there. And you came down, it was like Talbot, you came down an initial hill and along a bit of a flat and then down the big hill. And when you come along the little flat, the people coming up the big hill walking their toboggans back up couldn't see you coming. And I was on the front of the toboggan when we hit this poor girl. It was at night, and she must have gone 4 feet in the air. And I think she was okay, but that's the sort of stuff that can happen with tobogganing. In fact, when I'm up shoveling the stairs in Talbot Park now, which I do at the end of Cameron Crescent because I slipped there once and promised myself that was never going to happen again, they put these moguls at the bottom. And I'm in there at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and those moguls mysteriously disappear because very, very serious back injuries can occur with those things. And in fact, there was a family that I knew, and the mother and one or more of the kids were tobogganing over these moguls, I guess, and the mother hurt her back. She was flat on her back in her house for months. And we had a program at the school called, it's called Lancers, Leaside's Aging Neighbors Can Employ Reliable Students. It was an acronym. And one of our Lancers kids, I think it was Laurie Liscombe maybe, went over to their house every day when the kids came home from school. And what was interesting about that whole experience was that one of those kids, I ran into him about 4 years ago down at the park with his kids, taking them over the moguls. You think, what? Don't people learn? There was a big store it was a grocery store called the Power Store, and the standard of excellence was set by a guy named Butch Marshall, I think. And Butch Marshall played center field for the Metropolitan Motors team that you may have heard something about. That was the team that Ron Taylor played for, and Bill Kennedy and Chico Woods and Ron Setti. There were just a tremendous number of real good athletes that played for that team. Butch Marshall apparently put one through the power store window. And that's approximately where the Shoppers Drug Mart, the PharmaPlus is today. And now whether that ball went through on the bounce or on the fly, I'm not sure because I wasn't there to see it, but that was always the standard. That was a real long hit. Oh, well, when I was about 12 years old, I weighed 135 pounds, and I was heavy set for my age, but I could still get around the bases reasonably quickly, not as fast as 2 or 3 of the other fellas on the team, but it was okay. So that was where it started, and I carried that nickname through high school. But then after I started teaching out in Oshawa, I was known as Stick out there, and so I've lived with both those nicknames. We played Pee Wee baseball for Lefty Bag, and Lefty took us up for a road game one time up at Thornhill. And of course we had uniforms with pants and everything like that, and the Thornhill kids, they weren't as well shod as we were, and they were pretty impressed with that, and I guess we were kind of full of ourselves too. But when you're a kid, and this is why when I was coaching baseball, I always tried to line up some games out of town, tournaments or exhibition games, because for kids it is exciting to sort of play on an away field and feel like you're in the big time now, you're going on the road. The Lions Club had a pretty good budget, and they sponsored a marching band and 2 marching bands, the senior band and the junior band, and the majorettes, the senior majorettes and the junior majorettes. And I was with the junior band, and one of the big thrills with the junior band was when you went on a road trip. And I remember a couple of these road trips. One of them was an excursion to Mount Albert, Ontario. And the roads in Mount Albert weren't paved in those days. And there were plenty of horse-drawn wagons, I guess, still up around Mount Albert. So we went with the majorettes, the junior band and the junior majorettes went, because I think Charlie Scott, who was with the Lions Club, and his daughter was in the majorettes, had some connections at Mount Albert. So we went and we were part of the Mount Albert Christmas parade. And I remember we had to be careful where we put our feet because you were dodging horse balls in the street. In the band, they had straight bugles, and then they had 1-valve bugles that would play a few extra notes. And I was granted a 1-valve bugle right from the outset because I'd been taking trumpet lessons. And the band practiced, I guess, when I first joined, it practiced on Thursday nights in the basement of in the gym, the old gym of Besborough School. That was before the new gym was built. And then they moved over to Rolfe Road. And when we practiced at Rolfe Road, we came home past the corner store over here at Rumsey and Millwood. And we would stop in there, and we're about 11 years old, we're grade 7, and we'd each buy a cigar. Moon River Crooks, I remember them, wine-dipped, rum-soaked. And we'd smoke a cigar on the way home. That was the beginning and pretty much the end of my smoking career. Well, Lake Simcoe Ice and Fuel used to deliver ice. This was before the days of refrigerators, and you had a block of ice in your laundry tub in the basement or in an ice box. And they had these big tongs, and the ice was kept up at Lake Simcoe, and it was kept in sheds up there in sawdust. Okay, so they sawed the ice out of the lake in the wintertime, and then they just sold the ice over the course of the summer. So when we were kids, when the iceman went up to the door of the block of ice, this is in hot days in the summer, we'd run around to the back of the ice truck and try to get little chips of ice and get cooled down with that. That was great. And of course the milkman and the bread man came, and they had horse-drawn wagons in those days. And the milk box, all the houses had a milk box, and so mother would buy a bunch of these milk tickets. And the milkman would come, and in the milk box he'd find an empty milk bottle, suitably washed with a milk ticket in it. And for that milk bottle in the milk ticket, he'd put in another bottle of milk, and he knew his customers well enough to know which kind. Well, actually, I guess the ticket said whether it was going to be homogenized or 2% or cream or whatever it was that people were getting. But that's what those milk boxes were about. Kids today see those different colored bricks by the side door, and they don't even know what that's all about. But that's what it was. And then the coal man came. He was all black with coal, and there would be a basement window that would open, and he had the coal that he carried on his back off his truck, and in burlap sacks, and then he'd open the burlap sack and pour the coal down. There was a chute and a coal bin down in the basement, and the furnaces were coal fired in those days. And so there was the ice truck, the coal man, the bread man, and the milkman that came around. Nobody comes to the door anymore now except the Jehovah's Witnesses. I remember one time at the carnival, I was probably in grade 8. This was my introduction to gambling. You put 10 cents down on a number, and the wheel went round, and if the 3 numbers came up that you had your 10 cents on, you could get 40 cents. And I think I went up about $1, and I thought I had this whole thing figured out. And then my luck turned, and the next thing I knew, I was 20 cents in the hole, and I was able to put on the brakes finally and realized that I didn't have it figured out, and I don't think I did much gambling ever in my life after that. I put a few bets on the Maple Leafs now and then. I bet them to miss the playoffs, and I've been making money doing that for years. Well, first of all, Leaside has some very well-defined geographic boundaries. Okay, on 3 sides, it's really bounded by the Don Valley, and it's got a very busy street, Bayview Avenue, to the west. Well, then, on top of that, you have a tremendous number of community organizations that carry the name Leaside. So there's a strong identity with Leaside. And then the kids who grew up in Leaside, certainly the ones that I grew up with, they had a lot of experiences together away from school as well, through sports, and a lot of them would go to summer camps. They'd go to the same summer camps together and so on. So there was, when you think about what constitutes a bonding experience, there was plenty of opportunity for bonding experiences. And I think that remains true to this day. And the kids that play softball for me, I still keep in touch with some of those kids. And I went up to see the Henderson twins and Lauren Merklinger play softball this summer. And they're playing for their, insurance company or somebody like that. So it's about bonding, really. It's what it is. I attended Leaside High School as a student.
What years?
From 56 to 61. And then after I graduated in mechanical engineering, I taught 2 years in Oshawa, went back to U of T to get some credits, and I began teaching at Leaside High School in 1968. And retired, small R retired, started taking the pension in 2001. But I was back there for a couple of LTOs, and I've just this year retired officially. Big R retired now.
So now you're able to quote unquote take it easy because you were continuing to teach after your retirement.
Yeah, I still I do a little bit of tutoring. I don't do it for money. I just tutor some of the girl softball players that I coach, kind of on a volunteer basis, and it keeps me in touch with it a little bit. But that'll phase out as these kids that I've coached begin to graduate, and that'll be about it.
You mentioned people graduating, etc. Did you ever teach the same family, parents, and then the kids and things like that?
Oh yeah, I've taught. I'd have to sit down and make a list because I'm always apprehensive about making a mistake or forgetting somebody. So if I just did it off the top, then I'd forget somebody and feelings would be hurt. So I'd sooner not get into names. But yes, I've certainly done that. I always said, when the day came that some student came in and said, "You taught my grandfather or my grandmother," I'd know it was time to quit.